the days where we could sit back and say, well, you need us to make the computers work. Computers kind of work a lot on their own now. I'd much rather hire somebody that's got the culture fit and a desire to learn than somebody who thinks they know it all or has been around the block. And for me, myself, I wanted to be a teacher. I was dead set. I wanted to be a history teacher. I was convinced that was the move for me. I spent one day in a high school classroom and realized quickly those kids would have eaten me alive. And so part of it is becoming that department of yes and enablement and saying, I want those members of IT to really understand the business needs so we can hear the problem.
Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we are joined by Kevin Hall, the CIO of Westconsin Credit Union. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being on. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past theirs. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker has successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Kevin, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Westconsin Credit Union and your role there as CIO?
Yeah, Wisconsin Credit Union's been in the Menominee, Wisconsin area for over 85 years. Started as a primarily farmers credit union and is now branched out. And in the area, we have 15 locations and continue to grow in the area. So if you're in the western part of Wisconsin, as the name decrees, we'd love to chat to you. Our main focus is member experience and trying to do right by the people and making our community a better place. So it's a really great organization, one I'm super proud to be a part of. I've been with the company going on 4 years. Started as the VP of IT operations, came in with a background in banking and finance IT, and then took a chance when the C-suite position opened up, and am now operating as the CIO, overseeing all the IT areas within the company. So really excited to be a part of it and work for a company I'm proud to tout the mission of.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations on the promotion. That's great. So do you find it challenging? I mean, with 15 different locations throughout Wisconsin there, do you find it challenging, on the IT side to kind of manage that? I mean, how do you do that logistically with the people? Do you have somebody local, they run out, or they're people on site? How do you handle that?
We're pretty fortunate. It's not a huge footprint, so several hours traffic. So we're in that kind of unique model of being able to get to where we need to go within our recovery windows. So for the most part, we go out there. But the big thing to me is empowering end users as well. And I think it's a great opportunity for internal growth. So we work really hard with the team to say, hey, if you can walk someone through it, if you can do a little upskilling, up training of a team member at a location, especially some of the entry-level employees who are eager to see what they like in the career path. And so it's really good to help other people do it too. So if we can walk someone through it, we're going to walk them through it. If they can plug it into a rack, we're going to have them plug it into a rack. We'll do the FaceTime and be there with them. But for the most part, we really try to cut down on that road time in favor of helping people grow. And then you get champions. And that's the really great part too, is you find someone you know and you like, and you build a relationship, and then that position opens up. It's always been a good opportunity for us.
Well, and I think, we'd mentioned this before we started recording. I think it's really interesting how many people come to IT from these different backgrounds. I mean, and I think yours was a really interesting one because I think you were you weren't always set on being in IT, were you?
No, not at all. I like to joke that I kind of fell backwards through my whole career, and sometimes fate just takes over and you end up where you end up. But I think that's a really important thing. For me, myself, I wanted to be a teacher. I was dead set. I wanted to be a history teacher. I was convinced that was the move for me. I spent one day in a high school classroom and realized quickly those kids would have eaten me alive. I was not cut out for it. And kind of pivoted all around and fell my way into business. And so went to school for business, looking at accounting, finance. I ended up with a business management degree. and worked for a phone center and did some tech support because I was at the time I had helped someone set up their monitor in the office, and that was they're like, "Oh, you're good with this tech stuff. You help us do this." And it was very, you know, backwards way of doing it, and certainly plugging in a VGA cable does not, mean that I'm a tech guru, but it was a good start. And
That,
so moving on from there.
that's awesome. Well, I mean, I guess that explains your focus on helping those kind of the end users right there and getting them the chance to get familiar and then branch out into IT. And I think that's more people need to do that and kind of encourage it instead of kind of this. There's almost a gatekeeping often with IT. And I like that you guys really embrace, breaking down those barriers and welcoming people to try.
And I think that's so important. And it's also as a leader putting your money where your mouth is. Because it's one thing to say, hey, we're going to work you up, we'll have you do stuff. And all of a sudden now we're asking someone to do a bunch of work outside their job description and there's never any payoff at the end. So we try really hard if we're hiring, especially the entry level positions, the help desk and the specialists, we pull internally. And I tell
That's
our hiring
awesome.
managers, I'd much rather hire somebody that's got the culture fit and a desire to learn than someone who thinks they know it all or has been around the block. And we've had great success. Our last three specialist hires have all been off the front lines here, and do just phenomenal work because they know the systems, they know the people. I know we can rely on them and they're going to live to our culture. We can always train on IT and we use resources to help do that.
That's awesome. And we say it all the time. You can train IT. You can't train. You can't make somebody a good person. You can't make them. You can't train them to be good with people. Those are. I mean, that's really hard to do. I mean, some big companies have tried, and you can. I think you can make some progress. I mean, there are obviously some people with an aptitude towards it who will, who want to be better with people, but for the most part, people don't change that much. So I think finding the right cultural fit, and then teaching those skills, I think that's really the way to go. Teach the tech because you can do that. Can't teach those people skills so easily.
No, and I think that's the shortcoming in IT. I think so long it's been viewed as the guy behind the server that never interacts with people. And that model just doesn't exist much anymore. I think we've had a couple employees that you sit down with them one on one, they go, "Hey, my dream day, I don't talk to a single person. It's just me and the keyboard." And it's like, maybe there's a home for you somewhere, but really, we want the people that are going to evangelize technology and use it as a solution. And it goes both ways. It's both operationally and security.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I need someone in security that can explain to that end user why that email is bad, not just slap them on the wrist and move forward. But you need that back and forth. You need the collaboration to get the message home.
No, you're 100% right. I completely agree, and I don't know where that came from, other than I guess we're old enough to where we remember the early days where of the desktop computer, and it was a geeky existence. I mean, initially they didn't do anything unless you did the programming, and it was a kind of a geek counterculture for a while. And now that it's become so mainstream and so easy, you know that culture's got to shift. We got to get people out of that headspace of you can be an uber geek in the basement and never talk to anybody. I don't know where those people fit any either now. I mean, I really don't.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for IT. And I think you hit it on the head, and it's that gatekeeping mentality. If people have seen that model for so long,
Yeah.
and they look at IT as a lucrative, successful, high in demand career path, and go, I like people too much, and I wish you could kind of shake them and go, no, 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 that's the in demand. That's what's hard to find is the person that is interested but can carry on a conversation and can communicate things down in a way that people understand. Because I think that's another big gatekeeping measure is, oh, we use acronyms and high, terms that people don't understand. It's like, well, if I can't explain it in a way that someone understands it, do I really even understand it myself well enough? And that's such a big piece of it.
It really is. Well, let me ask you, because out there in Wisconsin, are kind of with you got boots on the ground, looking at you're hiring people directly from the area. Are you finding it challenging to find people with the people skills, or it's just kind of rather abundant there, just kind of culturally, locally? So that's not a big problem.
I'd love to cite the Midwest nice and say, oh yeah, no, you come to Wisconsin, we're going to treat you right, everybody's good. No, it is hard, and I think that is hard because when you get the application, we get a lot of people that do fit into that more traditional, like, hey, I speak binary and I don't want to talk to a human being if I can avoid it. And it's hard to kind of communicate out. They're like, no, we're a Wisconsin company. We expect a lot of our teams. I tell everybody we hire is like, you're not talking to external members. We don't make them do that necessarily, but your members are the people who work here, and we're going to expect you to go to meetings. We're going to expect you to carry on conversations, to stand up for yourself. You need to be able to do that. And we've had some very, very talented people come through in interviews that knew their stuff better than I did. I'll eagerly say, they were brilliant, but they wouldn't have been a good fit here. And, we'd opt for someone who's willing to grow and say, no, I want to learn the business. I want to learn about finance. I want to learn about how the business makes money so I can enable that strategy.
Well, I think culture is, and I love that you prioritize culture, because that's one of those things that I think people overlook too often. And it is just so important. It takes one bad kind of apple, if you will, to kind of spoil the whole bunch. But it's really just, it's so important, and it's hard, especially now, you've got 15 locations, and a lot of people have got a lot of remote workers. They've got, and even when it's all in one location, that culture is so important. And if you don't take the effort to really cultivate it and say, this is how we are, this is who we are, let's say we embrace, kind conflict, right? It's okay to disagree, but you got to be nice about it, right? And you don't promote people being cutthroat a-holes who are just, out for themselves. They might be right, but they're destroying the place in doing so. Nobody's enjoying coming to work anymore. And I think that's one of those things where the younger generation is, I'm not sure they're necessarily communicating it well, that's important to them. And I think the older generations are more they tend to be more the bah humbug. Why are you such pansies? Just go to work, do your job, right? And I think we tend to fall in the middle, where it's pretty clear that both sides have got a good point. But I think where it comes together is in creating a good culture. And I'm kind of curious, is that something that kind of existed there with at Wisconsin when you got there? Or was that something, internally with IT that you really focus on? And not to throw the rest of the company under the bus. I'm sure it's wonderful, but
Yeah.
how do you focus on that in yours, as the CIO?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Culture's always been really important to me. Well, I'll be honest. Academically, I thought it was a crock. And you're going through school and you're learning it on a book. You're reading about like, oh, the culture, you have to cultivate it. And I thought of the generation before me, which is kind of where I got my background. And they'd go, well, they pay you, don't they? And that was kind of always the mentality. It's like, well, they pay you, so who cares how they treat you? As long as they're giving you money, you're happy.
That's right.
And I do think you're spot on that our generation is kind of the moving middle of that. And then now you've got the younger generation that takes for granted that headway that was made and going, well, they have to treat you good. They have to treat you with respect. They have to give you empathy. And it's like, no, historically they didn't.
That's right. They really didn't.
It's a good thing. And so once I got into work very quickly, I learned it's more of who you work with and what you do and how you're treated than almost what you make. And I very quickly said, I will take less pay and do a less, idyllic job if I'm working for a company that cares about me and I support their mission and their values and I want to be part of it. There's a certain amount of pride in going around and saying, I work here and they treat me well. That makes up for a little bit of money. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not volunteering to work for free because the culture is good, but I do think it's a competitive advantage when you're looking for talented workforce. So I interviewed very heavily on culture. I always do. It's one of my big things coming into an organization is tell me about what makes you guys you. What do you have to stand out that's going to make me proud to be part of this? And Wisconsin has this amazing one. And I don't say that lightly. They do the CARE principles, which is how you treat people. And it's an acronym, but basically everywhere you go, it's just people looking after people and friends and trying to be good. It was the only place I've ever worked. When I accepted the position, I got cards in the mail. I lived in Colorado at the time and was moving back to Wisconsin. I got cards in the mail from peers throughout the organization saying, hey, we're so happy to have you come in here. And when I got here, I went to their boss. I was like, that was really cool of you to have them do that. And they went, we didn't make anybody do that. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, I thought that was just like a, hey, it's your turn, write the new guy a card,
Yeah.
And nope, it was genuine. And it was such a cool thing. So I think I won't say it was bad, but IT historically prior had this kind of like, that's kind of fluff. We aren't part of that. The IT mind kind of lends itself to, well, that's not black or white. I don't need it. And I think a lot of times it's a little bit of a false bravado in IT that's like, well, we're satellite department of the org. We make everything work. And so I've been very adamant that no, if the company does it, we do it. If there's a team building exercise, we're part of it. IT is part and parcel. There's no exceptions. I think it's helping just to get that integration into the org and saying, hey, that culture that works for them. And so maybe we're not doing the Walmart speech in the morning where we all sing a song and hype each other up, but some of that stuff is good and it really helps make you part of the org. And I think it's more important now than ever that IT is part and parcel of the business. We're a business enablement department. The days where we could sit back and say, well, you need us to make the computers work. Computers kind of work a lot on their own now. We can make the computers better and we can do better things, but really we have to be driving that strategy and part of the organizational strategic discussions. So to do that, we have to be part of the org, and that means living and dying by that same culture.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's been a really not subtle, but I mean, it's been a change that's been happening over time. You really, you're the first person I've heard say that. And it's like, that's true. The computers used to be a pain in the butt, and you needed IT to kind of get them to work more often. I mean, it's like an old crotchety car. We're like, oh, hold on, you just got to wiggle the key just right, and then it'll start. Don't worry, here you go. And that was happening all the time. And now they've gotten to the point where, yeah, they kind of work on their own. And so now our job isn't just, making it turn on and making it work. And so I'd like to dive into that a little bit. Like, so what do you do there at Wisconsin to help with that, with focus kind of on the strategy and the value add of IT kind of strategically versus the tactical of just getting the computer to work?
Yeah, and I think that's been my push from the beginning is I think getting the computers work, that's table stakes. That's the expectation.
Yep.
And so the big thing for us is getting into the departments, getting into conversations. So one thing I do in my position is I'll go through the whole org. I'll visit every location. I'll go to each department and sit down and just say, okay, let me learn and understand what are your challenges? What are you doing? And try to enable that and get the ball rolling. But that only goes so far. And so part of it is becoming that department of yes and enablement and saying, I want those members of IT to really understand the business needs so we can hear the problem and work collaboratively to a solution instead of the old days where I think people would come, well, I need a software solution. Hey, IT is going to drive that. They're going to come back and tell me exactly what I'm getting. And I'm just going to, eat off that plate. And now it's go through the problem statement together. We can say, okay, here's technological solutions we can have, or do we need to go to market? And if we need to go to market, let's go together. And we can talk about our tech stack and our appetite, and you can talk about the business case, and we can find a collaborative solution. So we're actually staffing up in kind of that business analytics is the traditional term, but it's more of a business enablement department of saying, okay, I want business members who have an IT understanding to really be those liaisons with the back office. So we're staffing that currently. We're hiring right now actually for positions in that department and really growing it fast to say, you need something and you don't know what it is. That's the exact time I want you to talk to IT. How do we solve your problem without you knowing exactly what the answer is? Because by then it's already too late. If you've got your solution in mind and you've picked it, well, now you're just coming back to the IT of like, hey, I found it, I'm on it, make it work.
Yep.
And so that's such a big thing. And I think the old days of shadow IT that used to be like, well, they can't do it. They can't make it work. They need a team of folks to get this going.
Yeah.
Well, now with a business credit card in 5 minutes, you can get a SaaS app up and running and IT has no idea. Now we have a problem. So
yeah. That's a great point. And it's funny because I think that more and more companies are starting to see that it's a collaborative approach. I mean, one on the planning and the strategy, but then when you start looking on the security side, you're starting to see more businesses, instead of it just being like, oh, it's all on the CIO or the CISO, like you make a decision, it's all on you. You're starting to see more of the kind of sharing that if you will with other members of the C-suite, where it's now, okay, look, we've got buy-in from the CFO as part of the decision, the CEO is part of the decision. We go through these things together as a group collectively, and we discuss what the challenge is, what our options are, and what we're going to do about it. And then we decide, okay, we're going to invest in this because it makes sense, or we're not going to invest in this because it may be a little costly. And then instead of it just being all on one person's shoulders, and it's like, oh, something went wrong, well, Jimmy said we didn't need it, and now we got hit, and so bye, Jimmy. Right, instead of it being that, now it's, I think a lot more companies are starting to see that this is it's a team effort, not just not IT in its own little silo by itself. So I love hearing that you guys are doing more of that throughout. Is it the same on kind of the security side as well? Not getting too much into security, but kind of on the strategy portion of security. How do you guys deal with that? Is it all the same?
Yeah, it's very similar. And my background was security coming here. I moved from a security VP role to an operational one and now kind of oversee both. But I think that's super important. And I think the historical adage of cybersecurity is the Department of No, I would go on and argue that's inherently false. And I think it's too easy now for people to just go, well, if you're the Department of No and you're going to govern what I do, then A, you're solely accountable for the actions.
Yep.
And B, I'm not going to listen to you and I'm going to just do my own thing, because at the end of the day, they're making money and we're not. And I think that's a conception that's prevalent throughout the org of, okay, we bring cash to the table, you guys spend our money. And I think it's so important now to go, hey, we can do anything and we can do it securely. We just need to collaborate and be part of the discussion. So instead of that Department of No, sometimes it's a department of, okay, here is the line. Here's what we've set via policy, regulation, standards. Here's the goals we need to adhere to. How can we navigate those hurdles to accomplish your business need together? And so we really train our security staff to do the same thing. If they're coming into a meeting and going, oh, we want to share, we had one recently, just a kind of example, we want to share data out with members and we want it to be super quick and easy. So we're going to just, we want to email it to them. I'm like, well, you can't do that. We need to have some control. So what's the case? Okay, we want to send it. Okay. And we walked through and we found a solution that used modern encryption and password authentication and identity access management. And we found a way to make it easy and accessible. And at the end of the day, everybody was happy. Now, was it as easy as just flipping an email? No, but they understood the use case. And I think when we go back to a conversation we had earlier about being able to communicate risks on the IT space using common accessible language, they all of a sudden realized, like, wait, we can do what if we just flip that in an email? How much would we get fined if we got, caught doing that? Or what we're opening what kind of lawsuits? And then all of a sudden, when you start to see all that risk piling up, now it's a business risk discussion instead of well, security just said we have to use encryption because it's some magic word and now I'm okay,
Oh, 100%. And I think the other thing that is changing, just as you're hitting on so many of these great things that are changing, right? From the computers being, crotchety old computers that needed help, and the perception of IT and the collaboration. I think the other thing, that's starting to shift, and people are starting to see that, wait, we're not, IT isn't just the place that spends money anymore. It's not just an expense on the balance sheet. It's part of the workforce. It can actually enhance. It should be seen as, hey, when we're working together, this is a force multiplier. This is we're mitigating risks that we might have overlooked, just like with your last example, and we're able to empower you to do more things faster. So it really becomes a force multiplier versus an expense. And I think I think people are starting to see that more and more, instead of it just being like, ugh, we can't spend money on that. Used to be the way. I mean, you rewind 10 years ago, and IT was just an expense. Sometimes a necessary expense, but it often got seen as just an expense. And how can we reduce that to the smallest amount possible? Because obviously you want to reduce your expenses, and increase your revenue as much as possible, because that's just what a business needs to do to be healthy. But now I think that mindset is shifting, and I'm curious, with everything else that's shifting, with at Wisconsin, do you see that as well? Is that kind of a view of the past? Is it still kind of there a little bit, or how are you see that shaping for you guys?
It's going really well. I will say I'm very spoiled here. I've worked a lot of organizations, and a lot of the times you're really fighting to get IT in the door. Hey, let me be part of these strategies. I can kind of promote what you can bring to the table. Well, I haven't had to have those conversations here. So as you said in a prior episode, of talking about how the CIO can gain buy-in, I'm spoiled. I'll say it till the end of the days. I'm way too spoiled here. Of people want to hear that opinion and want to know it, but part of that is that cultural mindset of IT greases the wheels. IT can simplify things. IT can take a very manual task and free up your skilled labor to do better things. An example here recently, we had an employee who did a manual task and kind of came to IT and was like, hey, this isn't a problem. Nothing's broken, but man, this is BS. I'm spending so much time on this thing and it seems so redundant. Well, we had one of our scripters look at it and he goes, I think we can automate that. And we went to our data scientist and she's phenomenal. And she looked at it and goes, oh, yeah, I can pull you a report that'll automatically generate that and then hand it to our scripting team and they'll auto generate the output first and we're done. They took an 8-hour month-to-month task and turned it into a 30-second just check to make sure it went out. And
That's
I think
awesome.
people hear that and go, oh, well, I'm going to lose my job. And I think there's this reluctance to bring that up. And we're like, no, but we just gave you over 7 hours of time back to
That's
do
right.
better and look for opportunities to improve. And your leaders are going to want to see what more can you bring to the table.
Yep.
And that kind of got evangelized to the org. And now we have more and more people coming going like, ooh, I don't like this. And I love that of getting IT to a place of comfort. And we're talking about table stakes of, hey, IT works. You're not having problems. What can we do better and how can we improve? And then putting the right people in the room that will appreciate that. And I think that's such a big piece of that shift in ideology. Hey, I'm not here to gatekeep your computers. I'm not here to tell you what you can and can't do. I'm here to make sure that you can accomplish your strategic objectives faster, cheaper, and more securely than if you didn't have me in the room.
I mean, that is well said, and that's exactly the focus that everybody needs to have going into it, and it's great that that's perceived the same way there. And going back to your point of people fearing that, oh, that's gonna, I'm gonna lose my job because you've automated so much of it. I think that's the same fear that so many people have with AI, and I think that while for sure, ultimately, none of us will have jobs. I mean, it's just ultimately, and then I don't know what happens, but that's not a problem for us right now.
Yeah.
It's a problem down the road. But for, in the meantime, you've got these super powerful tools that now help us get so much more done so much faster. And so it really is a matter of improving your quality of life at work, really. I mean, now you're a superstar because instead of taking 8 hours to do it, you've done it in 30 seconds. Boom. That's fantastic. And I think AI is really just that and it will be for a while for us to really just, kind of supercharge every employee. Mind you, you won't necessarily need as many employees, so that becomes a challenge. And so I understand the feeling there. But at the same time, if you've got the same number of people who are now supercharged, if you're 3xing or 4xing your workforce, if you're an 80 employee company, you're now at 300. You've got the manpower of 320 people. Why would you cut that down to 20 people to stay at 80? That doesn't make sense. So it's the wrong view of that same tool. So I don't foresee people cutting it down to 20 when they could have their 80 working at 300 as 320 people. I'll take that every day, and I think every business leader would as well. They're like, yes, let's go kick butt at the 320 level versus the 80 level. So so that being the case, let me get to a question. So where do you see AI, kind of in the financial industry, as from Westconsin Credit Union's perspective and the credit union industry? Do you see that being something that you guys are going to be able to utilize? Is it something that's not going to play too much of a role? How's that look for you guys?
I think it's huge. I think there's fear, and I think rightfully so. One of the big fears is in the financial industry. We're very heavily regulated. And with that comes some concerns and making sure, sometimes it's a little slower progress, but that's a good thing. I think the regulation is there inherently to protect people's money, and that's pretty important. So we're appreciative of that. But I think it's important to also not say, oh, well, either A, we're too regulated, let's not even bring it to the table. That's the wrong thinking. And to your point, a lot of it looks at, and we have our strong culture, we go, well, we don't want to downsize people. Do we really want to bring this in? And my pushback would be, I don't think you can stop progress. And I think historically we've seen it all the time. When we look at the generation before us, I had a meeting in college with a guy and he said, well, when you write your letter, think it through, because by the time it gets there, you might not be as emotionally charged as when you wrote it. I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, what on earth are you talking about? And I asked him, I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you send a message to somebody, it takes time for them to receive it and get it. And I was like, no, it's like a second. And he's like, he was talking about, well, in my day, they mailed it. And
Yeah.
so,
Pony
okay, to write
Express.
a letter, I literally wrote a letter, threw it in the mail, and 3 days later they got it. And now they're like, why are you mad at me? And I said, okay, well, if we could go from 3 days in mailing letters to instantaneous communication and not see this drastic downshift in staffing, I don't think AI is going to invalidate us. Now, to your point, someday when it's, T1000s and we have a whole different
That's right.
problem, sure. But in the modern era, I think people look at it and go, oh, well, I'm going to be more efficient. They're not going to need me. But to your exact point is capitalism has proved, no, 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 you're going to be more efficient and they're going to just want to output more. And we can serve more members. We can provide better output. We can get more locations. We can do all these things because we're empowered with technology. From a financial, to get back to your question, in the financial space where I really see it bringing value, especially in the credit union world, is helping us help our members. And I think we have a lot of inherent data in credit union world and financial world. We see a lot of stuff. How can we leverage that to help people and looking through that? And right now, it takes financial analysts or, financial advisors. You come in, you sit down, and fortunately in the credit union space, that's a service we offer, but people are adverse to doing it. I know a lot of people that go, I'm not ready for a financial advisor, or I don't have this, that, and the other thing. Well, AI can do a lot of that work. It can look at your spending and say, hey, you're doing things that are kind of not standard. Or I think more people need to hear, kudos, you're doing a good job. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of financial IT is digging into volumes and seeing, hey, did you know you spent $1,000 at Starbucks the last couple of months? And sometimes it's just that visibility that it would take historically a person pouring through receipts to do. And all of a sudden now you can get your AI blurb and say, hey, here's what you're doing. And then it's on us and the ethical use of that technology. And I think a lot of good companies, you'll start to see the ethical approach to AI coming quick, fast follow to the implementation of AI.
I think that is awesome. And it's funny because as you say that, I was like, that is exactly how we use AI on the security side. I mean, you've got these massive logs coming. I mean, just imagine your Microsoft tenant alone, right? A company with, say, 100 employees all logging in and using Microsoft just for email or whatever they're using it for, SharePoint, you name it. The logs are crazy, throughout the day, and it's got to be monitored all the time to see if, if Jane logged in Wisconsin, and then 15 minutes later logs in Paris, France. It's like, Jane's fast, but she's not that fast. There's no way to get there. And to see those things, automatically without setting up these just a million different rules, but to be able to sift through this, a flood of data, that's just Microsoft. Then you look at the endpoints and the network and that, all the other web apps that people are using and be able to see all that in real time. It's overwhelming. So using AI, just like you were saying with using AI on the financial side to sift through all that data quickly and say, oh, hey, this is what's going on, and be able to do the same for security. And I think that it was really cool to hear that parallel, because for whatever reason, I didn't even make the connection. I was like, oh, that's a brilliant use of AI on the financial side. That's exactly what we do in security, but it didn't even dawn on me. And it's like, I love that. I mean, can you imagine your bank just like you get this quick little AI, financial advisor report? Awesome. It can be there in your app, and it can, tell you, you get an update instead of just like a report monthly, whatever it is. Ask it questions and be like, hey, and it's tied right into your stuff. It's got all your data secure, and it's just you, keeps everything compartmentalized. It's all secure. I think that's freaking awesome. That's exciting. I mean, to bring that to the masses, cool.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see it. And I think to your point, as we go back to the business narrative too, as you said, with security, again, people are going to look at that and go, well, what about all the 10 people that sifted through logs? It's like, in my opinion, they can go out into the business now and make an impact and really analyze things as they're coming up, do more risk assessments, do more in the org, and circle back to the business as a whole. and not spend their time scrolling through logs. I think back early in my career, I distinctly, as you were saying that, I distinctly remember going through and using spacebar to highlight log entries that stood out, and hours upon hours of just mind-numbing scrolling.
Brutal.
AI could do that in a tenth of a second.
Yep.
And it would take me hours. But now if I had those hours back, what could IT give to the org? If you put trained cybersecurity professionals who understand both the business and the risks and put them into project meetings and had them be those conversationalists that could have the discussions early, you're not the Department of No. Now we're back to being that enablement. And all of a sudden now we're not needing 10 people reading logs. We can have 10 people out in the org having discussions, being part of the company, and the log work's still getting done.
That's right. I love it. This is fantastic. I think that is really, this is just so spot on with the perspective that people need to have, about IT, about, cybersecurity, culture, you name it. I think you're the shining example of what every company needs when it comes to a CIO and that perspective. So I applaud you and Wisconsin for that. I think it's just spot on, and it's a nice breath of fresh air, because you get kind of a lot of different perspectives, and everybody's out there doing their best. But I just love that the perspective you have on all this, and I think it fits so nicely with bridging the human aspect of being human and technology, and bringing those together in a way that works well to empower the business and help people. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. We're going to be spending a lot of time at work. And if, technology should be there to help us, do more faster, better, and have an easier time of things, versus just being a factory worker who's now working harder and faster. Why? The technology is going to let you do it. And now you can kind of supervise that, and the machine can move faster, and you can have an easy time, watching the machine do its thing, just like what you guys did with the data scientist and the, saving 8 hours. Yeah. Absolutely. It's brilliant. So I love all that. This has been absolutely fantastic. And if you have any parting words before we head out, the floor is yours. But also, please let everybody know where they can find out more about you and Wisconsin.
Yeah, parting words, I would say I just super appreciative of this, and I think it's really important that IT remains a collaborative environment, especially on the security front. I don't see cybersecurity ever being the competitive advantage of trying to hide everything behind a curtain. If we all do better, the world gets better. So just huge thanks to you for putting stuff like this together, letting people share what's worked for them, what different ideas, and just an awesome collaborative community. And I think the more we can do that, the better we can do. We do so much better together than everyone trying to solve these problems alone. So love this opportunity and this program you guys put out. As for finding me, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. If you want to know more about me, I'm happy to reach out. If especially to people who are on the sidelines thinking this is a cool path, and maybe you made mistakes, or I didn't have the most traditional background and I'm looking to get into it, I would tell those people, take the shot. There's certifications, there's coursework, there's passion. There's a lot of entry-level positions now that are just looking for people who are passionate to learn. There is an employee shortage here. And I think if you have non-traditional skills, that's actually a competitive advantage coming against people who may not have those talents. We look for people with service industry skills, and they have a huge leg up on those who don't in our world. And for Wisconsin, if you're in the western Wisconsin area or the eastern Minnesota, East Soda doesn't have the same ring to it. Otherwise, we'd change. We'd love to have you talk to us. Westconsincreditunion.org.
That's awesome. Kevin, thanks for coming on the show, and until next time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.